Hey everybody, VCers, YouTubers, jazz lovers, welcome to my channel, welcome to this segment. It's spring here in Jersey, March 22nd, 2025, which is interesting because the genius that I'm going to show my collection and talk about him would have been either 124 years old or 125 years old this year, depending on what book you read or what you go by. And of course, that is Louis Armstrong. Louis Armstrong was born either in 1900 or 1901. He always told us that he was born on the 4th of July, 1900, but we found that not to be true by some, jazz aficionados, archivists that went back and through their records found out that in New Orleans, the young Louis Armstrong was born in 1901. So either way, but he is a genius. He doesn't get the love that he deserves. He doesn't get the props he deserves from a lot of people on YouTube. I see a lot of people on YouTube that do jazz don't really talk too much about Louis. Louis was not into bebop. He was friends with Dizzy Gillespie. I think they were on stage together. He kind of kept to traditional. He was more of an entertainer later on in life. He started to sing throughout his career, but the singing, I think, is what drew me in. I love that singing. I love that improv that he did. Growing up, my mom was a Louis Armstrong fan. My uncles always had Louis Armstrong in playing on their Victrola, on their record players. And once I got involved with records myself, and I think also because his last recorded music was for the James Bond film 1969's On Her Majesty's Secret Service with George Lazenby. He did We Have All the Time in the World, which was a montage, which was sung as a montage, and I believe the end credits, and it was also revised in a Daniel Craig film, the last Daniel Craig film. So it has a really a place in my heart, and I have a lot of funny stories about that song because I love that song. And just for instance, I picked up this book, which is great because this book shows you all of Louis Armstrong would record all his music, and even friends coming over for dinner, he would record them on a reel-to-reel tape, and he would make his own boxes. That's a couple of those boxes. He would actually, it was his hobby, he called it. And but this book is great. But this book was, from the reason I brought it out, I wanted to show before we start handwritten lyrics of We Have All the Time in the World by Louis Armstrong that he was writing on the plane to learn this song when he was going to perform that song. And it's just amazing. Sinatra did the same thing. Sinatra would sit on a plane and he would write out the song. I'm not sure if Louis would write out the song multiple times or he would just read it and memorize it. He had a really great memory. He was a great actor as well. He was in some movies I'm going to show, some films that he was in. He made a lot of money. He was always working. He worked since he was age 12. He learned how to play the horn in a boys' school in New Orleans. He was arrested at age 12 for firing a weapon with a blanket. It was his uncle's, I believe, 38. And he fired it into the air New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, morning of, or 12 o'clock, and swooped up by police. A young black kid in that neighborhood without any real connections to any power brokers was swiftly arrested, put in a boys' home. But in a way, he always says that was a twist of fate because he started blowing that horn in the band at the school, and it just evolved. He got hooked up with King Oliver, and he is what Beethoven and Mozart are to classical. He is what the bard is to playwright and prose, and he is what Hendrix is to the guitar. He is that influential, and that's why I'm saying he does not get the props that he deserves. And Pops is what he called everyone. He was also called Pops, but he was he was the ambassador before there were ambassadors that were celebrities. But I'm not going to go into too much of that because it's not hyperbole. But I'm not going to go into that because I want to keep this in a good length. I have a lot of records. I'm going to just go over the collection, and then I'll go over my favorites. But once again, Miles Davis dug him. He was not into that type of improv that Miles Davis was blowing. He was not into bebop. He was an entertainer. Like I said, his voice, his scat. He was loved by every celebrity from Nat Cole to Dean Martin, Sinatra, Bing Crosby. Him and Sinatra recorded together. They were on TV shows together. He was on so many TV shows. You could go on YouTube, and you're fortunate because you could actually see one of his earliest recordings from, I believe, Denmark, Copenhagen, which they basically did a show for a certain audience, but they filmed it, and what they did was they spliced in applause from a theater, and it appears to be a live record, but that was 30s. So when this man was 18, 20, 22, he was the world's greatest trumpet player. So we're going to go over some of his records. I hope you like this segment, and I'm just going to say again, thank you for stopping in, and please sub to the channel and tell me what you think about Louis Armstrong, because I don't think he gets the love that he should, jazz musician wise, and the trailblazer that he was. Don't forget, it wasn't easy for a man such as Louis Armstrong to succeed in that world in the 1900s through the 50s and then 60s, and then he became just a god among celebrities and the world. The fans in Italy loved him, all over the world. Jazz was always embraced in Europe, and he was embraced throughout the world, Australia, Europe, what have you. So I'm just going to go over these records, and I'm not going to talk about them. I'm just going to show them. Maybe I'll talk about them because I can't keep my mouth shut. But thanks again, and if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. We really appreciate it. Okay, so we have here Louis Armstrong's on Lotus, Greatest Hits. There's a lot. I was surprised I have so many because I keep my jazz in a jazz vault. This is an Italian record, Swaggy, the Jazz Makers. This is his first recordings, the Hot 5, 26 to 1927, the Hot 5 and the Hot 7. Oh, this is an Australian press. I'm sorry. Australian press. There's the label. Great picture of Louis. Louis was thinner. He started working on the riverboats in New Orleans, and with the food and the partying. He was married 4 times. Last wife was his true love. Ended up living in Corona, Queens, right by the field where the Mets played, not too far from where the Mets played in Queens. And I was happy enough and lucky enough to visit his house, which is a museum. It has been expanded, so I intend to go back there and maybe do a video. Here we have In Memoriam. This came out after his death, I believe, in the 70s. This is just great. He loved Jack Teagarden, a trombone player who was in his all-star band. His manager, Joe Glasser, was his mentor and manager and confidant. He said it was his best friend. He was kind of involved with the mob in Chicago, I believe, and he kind of got involved with Louis because Louis wanted a manager that would protect him and that had a name that would protect him, because Louis was actually intimidated by a lot of mobsters. If you recall back in those days, He actually played in places owned by Al Capone in Chicago, and they would squeeze him. And if they didn't want him in that one cabaret or club, they wanted him in that club. Lewis had a lot of difficulties with that and was almost killed a few times, threatened at least, because he was a moneymaker. So when he got hooked up with Joe Glasser, things started going well, and he worked his ass off. Lewis never stopped working. Here's a deluxe on Decca. This is a nice double. This is a Japanese press that we were gifted by Big John. Big John's a big fan of Japanese. Best of Louis Armstrong, Japanese MCA, cleaned in February 8, 2015. So I've had this that long. Great photo. He was in many movies. He could read lines. He was a great actor. I believe had he been white, he could have been as good an actor in films and star in films as, like a Dean Martin or a Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby, that type. Here he is actually talking about movies with the film called Paris Blue featuring Louis Armstrong. And this has the great band of Duke Ellington. And I believe Paul Newman is in this. Paris Blues, Paul Newman, Joanne Woodward, Sidney Poitier. This is a great movie. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. This is still in shrink. It was $1.99 when I got it years ago. One of my first albums. Here we have the best of on MCA, another double. You could see not a gatefold, but a double. Here is Louis Armstrong, the Snake Rag. I believe this may be an import. No, this is a audio fidelity record. So this is I remember this is a great sounding record. This is some early things by him. This has Peanuts Hucko, Timmy Young, Billy Kyle, Danny Barcelona. This is his later band. This was recorded in 1959. So what his Joe Glasser, his manager, ended up doing was finally surrounded him with outstanding musicians. He used to play with ragtag type of guys in and out that were great, but not of his caliber. And you could always tell that he was so much better. But when Glasser got involved, he hooked him up with what was called the Louis Armstrong All-Stars. And there was probably 3 or 4 different variations of that All-Star band. But that band really swung, and he really loved, from what I read, he really loved the trombone player, T. Garden, and he also sang with Louis, would give Louis a break. Here's one that's a compilation. Remember How Great, it's a Lucky Strike record that was probably, you bought cigarettes and you bought a carton of cigarettes, maybe you got a record back then. This has Louis Armstrong singing St. Louis Blues, the John Handy tune, so that's fabulous. Here's another great shot of Louis blowing. He would blow so hard. He would blow high C's and F's, and he would break his lip. He broke his lip so many times and would continue to blow, and that really hurt him. I think he got to singing as much as blowing, and his singing was what really made him an entertainer later on. People just love that song, that phrasing, and everyone picked up on it. This is a really cool cover. This is a painting, The Genius of Louis Armstrong. This is volume 1, 1923 to 1933. So really early, and I wish I could read these liner notes to you. This is a Columbia pressing. Don't really know how it sounds, but it's the John Hammond collection, a great producer and talent finder. This is a nice one, Town Hall Concert, Louis Armstrong and his orchestra. This is a famous concert he did in Town Hall, or at the Town Hall. And one of my favorite songs on here is the St. James Infirmary, which is just makes you cry. And I have some of those for my favorite. I have a recording of that as my favorite. Here you have Louis on Mercury. These always sound good. Louis on Mercury does Cheesecake, Pretty Little Missy, The Circle of Your Arms. There's Hello Dolly song, So Long Dearie. Of course, when Hello Dolly came out, he knocked the Beatles off of the #1 spot, I believe in '64. I'm not sure what Beatles song was, Love Me Do or whatever. But here's a nice cover. I love this cover. I'm beginning to see the light, and it don't mean a thing. And this is with Duke Ellington. So this rocks. It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. And beginning to see the light with Duke. He also does songs with the Jimmy Shore Orchestra. A fun fact is he loved Guy Lombardo. He loved Guy Lombardo. He would go to sleep. He had reel-to-reels brought with him. His valets would bring reel-to-reels. He would record everything. And he would go to sleep to Guy Lombardo's orchestra. Here's a great one from the movie, Five Pennies with Danny Kaye. Here's a mono music. That was a stereo. Here's a mono. That one still has a shrink on, believe it or not. Coronet Records. Lewis plays Fats. Satch plays Fats. Satchmo. Satch Pops. One of my favorites is Louis Armstrong plays Fats. I have another recording of that I'll show. Here is a really old Decca. I believe that's the stereo. I think this is a gold Decca. Oh no, black Decca. Great cover. And here's the another one with a hole punch. This is from the music library of the University of Washington, D.C. So pretty cool, right? Picked this up somewhere in a collection. Satchmo the Great, he was nicknamed Satchel Mouth back in the 40s and 30s because his mouth was so large. He had that great chops, and that was probably why he was so good at blowing, and his big body, his big chest. Like I said, he was originally not as fat or robust as he was, but he gained weight, always had a weight problem later on. But this is Satchmo the Great, music and extracts from the soundtrack of the film Satchmo the Great, which I've never seen. But this is a really cool album to have on Columbia. It's probably a 6-eye. Here's the inner. Here's the 6-eye. And I was talking about his satchel mouth. And when he was getting off a plane in London, or maybe whatever airport at that time was in outside of London, the greeters who was like, it was like Beatlemania, it was Louis Mania, called him Satchmo, and Satchmo briefed for satchel mouth, and that stick. And Louis said he loved it. He loved it. This is a Dolby system recording, so probably mono, stereofied somehow, which I don't really dig, but we'll listen to it. Here is Louis Armstrong, Fats Waller, a rare 1938 performance with Jack Teagarden and his buddy Bud Friedman. And I remember watching this on, I believe this is actually filmed, but that's a great cover. This is on the Audio Fidelity label. So as you know out there, the original Audio Fidelity records, if this is a silver, or this is a green one, I'm not sure how this sounds, but the original silver labels really sound great. So we're going to move along. We're moving along here. What a Wonderful World, Project 3 Records. This has a barcode. This is 1988 or 86, New York. Here's a great box set that I picked up. This has 3 records. It's his records from the New Orleans sessions, but it has a great, which I've just read actually, a great booklet of rare photos and just a great essays on the early Lewis. Here he is on Time, the first black, I believe, artist, or at least first jazz artist to be on the cover of Time. He was one of the first jazz artists to be recorded. He was one of the first of everything jazz. And like I said, he really needs to get that love that he deserves. Here's a Verve's Choice with Louis Armstrong. And you can see that. There's the great songs on here. Great album. Here is a compilation that has Lewis at Town Hall, Ain't Misbehavin'. He was actually in the play or the film Ain't Misbehavin', I believe, and he did some numbers from that. I Like Jazz, another compilation. This is a 6i, Columbia, and Lewis performs on here. New Orleans Jazz Lips, and another track, I believe. So everybody's on here. This, of course, is a greatest hits on A&M, or ABC rather. It's a cool. This was a whole series. These actually had a like an envelope, and you could pull the record out, and it had great liner notes. And I have Grassroots. I have other bands from ABC on here. Here we have Up Front, Louis Armstrong, Up Front label, probably a budget label. Of course, the soundtrack to Hello Dolly, which he had no idea what he was getting into when he recorded Hello Dolly. He learned how popular it was when people started asking him to sing it in concert, because back then there was, you do a record, you do a side. Later on, he got involved with the soundtrack, I guess. But Hello Dolly, and it was released as a single on Cap Records. Just amazing. Here's another Verve's Choice. Different, it must be a mono. Hello Louis Armstrong on Metro. He was on every label. I don't know who's getting paid, but he was on every. Here's an Italian press. That is his live recording at Carnegie Hall. He did a whole show, which was renowned. There's the label, a Joker label. Here's a record he did with Bing Crosby. Bing and Satchmo, great record. Satchmo and Bing were great friends. Bing Crosby loved him. If you think about the phrasing, it's kind of rumored that Bing took some of his phrasing from Satchmo, Louis Armstrong. If you listen to Bing later, if you listen to him now, you'll start to hear what I'm talking about. And this is with the great Billy May's orchestra. And of course, he did a few tunes with Sinatra and Bing on High Society with Grace Kelly. Here is a stereo. This still has the shrink on it. And I wanted to show you a close-up without the shrink. And there's the back, some great shots. So he had a great career. He would go back and forth. He would go to Hollywood, do his thing, fly back, do his show. It was similar to what Sinatra did with the Rat Pack, doing movies and going in and out. And this is a nice greatest hits. This is a West German pressing, Germany. Okay, now we're going to get to my favorites, best sounding, and my favorites really fast. Hello Dolly on Cap Records. That still has a shrink. Here's one without the shrink. If you have to get this, if you want to listen to a great recording, get this. We have All the Time in the World, this great soundtrack on UA. This one sounds great, one of my favorites. These are the ones that I recommend, sound great. Louis and the Dukes, although he wants to be referred to as Louis, they put Louis and the Dukes, and this was a great ensemble that he played with, and this is a great recording. I believe this is a silver, it's a black label, so I do have audio fidelities in silver. Here's a great Handy, Japanese pressing, plays WC Handy on Sony CBS. This is an original 6i These are my favorites. These are great tunes, great content, not just great recordings, great content. This is a mono, obviously, on Columbia. And it's got to be a 6-eye, right? And here you have, again, Satch Plays Fats. Great title, right? Satch Plays Fats. Another 6-eye. This has been redone, but this is an original. I love this record. Good sound, just great sound for the era. Here is, of course, the reissue from, I believe, Analog Productions. This sounds great. This is a 45 RPM of St. James Infirmary. Ain't Got No Body. Ain't Got No Body, the one that is a classic. I Ain't Got No Body. This lead singer from Van Halen did his version of that. Louis Prima did it. Louis Prima. Here's the 33 1/3 of this reissue, I believe. Oh no, this is the original. This is the original. There's that silver label. These records sound great. If you buy these records, this is a Roulette original, and this is Emus reissue. Now, whenever I play this record, I talked about this record before, The Great Reunion, Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington. It's Louis's band of all-stars and Duke Ellington on piano, all Duke Ellington material, but this record will knock you out. Everyone I play this record for are on their phones buying this record on eBay. The other session from this was from this session, 2 sessions. This is a reissue. And this has, like I said, the All-Stars, Trummy Young, Barney Bigart, who plays clarinet. We played with him before. Mort Herbert and Danny Barcelona. This is just great. I love the material on this better than the first one, but that's just me. This has the beautiful gatefold. This is a reissue, a Roulette reissue from Analog. Of course, you can see the quality. Here, of course, you can't go wrong. The 2 sides they recorded, actually 4 sides at the double record. Louis and Ella, material's great on Verve. Just pick this up, listen to it on YouTube. Ella Fitzgerald is, of course, one of my favorites as well, jazz singer. Her and Louis do such great duets together live, harmonies live, scatting live with a great band, probably Louis's band. Here's the reissue of Satchmo Plays King Oliver. This is the reissue. There's the replica of the label. And, of course, to end it all, my friend Tony got me this. I thank you, Tony, Porky and Bess. And they do the whole play. They do the whole opera. Ella Fitzgerald, Louis Armstrong, orchestration conducted by Russell Garcia. And this is a German pressing, and this sounds great. So I just wanted to go through that quickly. I didn't want to keep up too much of your time. But please, check out those records that I talked about at the end here. You're not going to go wrong. Listen to them on YouTube if you can. But, of course, streaming is not going to do it justice. Get the CD, get the vinyl, and that's it. But Louis Armstrong, man, would have been 124, 125 years old, right? The best, the top of the top, like I said, on par with anybody that you would call a genius, on par with Einstein. The things he did are still being done today. And to top it off, what I'm going to do is read from, I'm not going to read it because I kind of paraphrase it, but to complete this, Miles Davis said, no one that's playing trumpet today has not played something that Louis Armstrong played. Louis Armstrong never played a bad note, and that's basically coming from Miles. And Miles doesn't talk much, but Miles appreciated Louis and what Louis did for the horn, man. Okay, so thanks again. Please subscribe. If you can, please like and subscribe, and we really appreciate it. So check out Louis. You won't regret it. Ciao. Stay safe.